Let's talk some UVA football news and notes. Chris Graham here with some weekend updates. First bit of news that we want to talk about is the report from late this week that Bronco Mendenhall, former UVA football coach, had talked with Stanford about the head coaching job open out there. Not surprising to hear that Bronco has his name out in the mix for a big time job like Stanford. Um, it does just kind of bring back into question the circumstances surrounding what happened about a year ago this time when Bronco stepped down after 6 seasons at Virginia last December. Bronco was 36-38 at UVA after a 2-10 season in year one. He had Virginia in the Orange Bowl by I guess it was year four in 2019. He stepped down a few days after Virginia's 29-24 loss to Virginia Tech in that regular season finale. And he insisted at a press conference on December 2nd that this decision was his and his alone. But in the months since it's emerged, there was speculation at the time that there was some force to that. But it's emerged that there was indeed some internal pressure on Mendenhall to step down. I was in communication with someone who would know, as I'll identify this person as, who said that Bronco was presented with the sort of an ultimatum to make some changes on the defensive side of the ball, and he just didn't want to. He didn't want to fire any of the people he'd been around with for a long time. Yes, that meant that everybody had to scatter, but he stuck to his principles. Couldn't fire somebody that he had worked with for a while. A while being 10+ years, and so he fell on the sword. Virginia, as it turns out, under Tony Elliott, made massive improvements on the defensive side of the ball, which obviously that's what the goal was there, right? Last year, Virginia ranked 13th in the ACC, 122nd nationally. There's only 131 teams in FBS football, allowing 466 yards per game, and that was a big reason Virginia stumbled at that 6-6 finish with the nation's third best offense, 515 yards a game. But so this year, the defense allowed an average of 357.6 yards per game, over more than 100 yards per game less than what was allowed last year. That ranks seventh in the ACC and 44th nationally. So, I mean, big improvement there, obviously, on that side of the ball. What was the problem for Virginia this year was that the offensive side of the ball was nowhere near what it was last year. I mean, it was, third in the country last year. This year, the offense stumbled down from 514.4 yards per game last year all the way to 344.4 after being ranked third nationally last year, 102nd nationally this year. And that's a big reason Virginia went 3-7. So inconsistencies in getting both those units to play, the equal level of good football is an issue there. Mendenhall's name has come up with a lot of jobs this year. The Stanford job would have been the most high profile. And honestly, if I'm the Stanford people, I look at a guy like Bronco Mendenhall, who coached at a place, he coached for a long time at BYU, 11 years, 99 wins there. He won there consistently. That's a tough place to recruit athletes to. And then Virginia, he won 36 games in 6 years, but he took Virginia to an Orange Bowl. That's an even tougher place to coach. And it's both are in line with what Stanford is a tough place. It's a school with high academic standards. And administration not willing to bend to those, to admit football players and the number of football players you need to maybe be competitive. You have to be smarter with what you do. Bronco's got a record that would indicate that he could do that. And for whatever reason, he's not the guy, as far as we're being told, the Athletic with the reporting there. So, but the fact that he's back out there in the market means that, Virginia's 3-7 season this past season, which could have been a lot better if only he'd made a change at defensive coordinator and kept the offense as it was. Wow, that's just something for us to think about there, right? Let's switch gears and talk about one of Bronco's former alums, quarterback Bryce Perkins, a reclamation project of Bronco, his offensive coordinator Robert Anae, the quarterbacks coach Jason Beck. You might remember Bryce Perkins was a guy that was highly regarded coming out of high school. He went to Arizona to start with, suffered a broken neck. I keep talking about broken necks here. Talked about one on another podcast I did today. He then ended up, after that broken neck and being in a halo for several months, he ends up in junior college trying to reclaim his career. Does well in his 1 year of JUCO ball, comes to Virginia, and is inserted right away as a starter. Had 2 solid seasons for Virginia, led Virginia to back-to-back bowls, a 17-10 record in 2 seasons, ACC championship game appearance, Coastal Division championship, and then the Orange Bowl. And he was an undrafted free agent in the NFL in 2020, actually made the LA Rams roster out of training camp as an undrafted free agent. So that's an accomplishment right there. He's been on the Rams roster. They've kept him for 3 years in the fold. And he even started a game this year for the Rams with Matthew Stafford, the Super Bowl winning quarterback from last year. He's out for the season with injuries. The backup, and the Rams have kept 3 quarterbacks, which is rare in the NFL in this day and age. The backup is a Wake Forest guy, John Wolford. And Wolford has been battling injuries. That's why Perkins got the start a few weeks ago at Kansas City. And with Stafford out for the season and Wolford battling injuries, it looked like Perkins would maybe be the guy to get the start this week on Thursday night with the Rams playing the Las Vegas Raiders. But then Baker Mayfield became available. The Panthers cut loose Mayfield at his request after the decision was made by the Panthers that he would not be either the starter or the backup going forward this season. It was his first season with the Carolina Panthers, a struggling season for that franchise, obviously, after Mayfield had a pretty good run in Cleveland. It ended last year. He had some injuries, and that led to a disappointing season, and Cleveland decided to go in the Deshaun Watson direction. And so Mayfield was released on Monday. Again, the Rams played on Thursday night. They signed, they claimed Mayfield off waivers on Tuesday. He literally got on a plane, flew to LA later in the day on Tuesday. Reports are that the Rams actually forwarded their playbook to him so he could be reading it on the plane flight across country. And after John Wolford started the game for the Rams, played one series, and the lingering issues with his neck led to him being replaced. The Rams, who had Bryce Perkins active as well for the game, Sean McVay decided to go with Baker Mayfield. And Mayfield, now for the most part in that game, the Rams offense sputtered. They were down 16-3 in the second half, but then he led the Rams on 2 second half scoring drives, including a 98-yard drive in the final 2 minutes of the game. And the Rams won that game 17-16. So good news for the Rams as far as that goes, but horrible news for Bryce Perkins, if you ask me, that a guy who is basically in the building for a day before an actual game, he's had barely the opportunity to learn the playbook, is given the shot to go in the game and see what he can do to spark the offense. Doesn't for 2.5 quarters, but then eventually does get things moving late in the game, and they win the game. And Perkins never got off the bench. The fact that he's been there for 3 years, he's had the ability to obviously run this team, starting 4 preseason games, 2 starts in the preseason each of the last 2 years, putting up good numbers, 65% completion percentage, 5 touchdowns, 1 INT in those 4 starts. He's a guy that knows the playbook as well as anybody in that quarterback room, and never got off the bench. And you might remember the game that he started at Kansas City. Sean McVay kept that game plan very, very, very vanilla. Short passes, behind the line of scrimmage passes, screen passes, only a couple of attempts even beyond 10 yards downfield through the air. Perkins ended up at that game 13 of 23 for 100 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 INTs, 44 yards rushing, led the team in rushing, but really not given a chance to show what he could do. That or McVay has no confidence in what he can do. Either way you go there, I think that's a sign that after this season's over, Bryce Perkins is going to be looking for a new job. Hopefully his agent is already putting out feelers to other front offices who might have some interest in Perkins in the future. And it's sad news because, I was very excited when he had a chance to start a couple of weeks ago. And very frustrated when you saw the way things were going in terms of the play calling, that obviously McVay had no confidence in him. And then this really cements that. So, if we'll be talking more UVA sports, probably tomorrow, Sunday. I think there's some more football news we're going to jump into. We're still kind of developing some stories on how Robert Anae, the former offensive coordinator at Virginia, is now the offensive coordinator at NC State. Jason Beck, who we mentioned, his quarterbacks coach, is now the offensive coordinator at Syracuse. We're going to look at that and how that might impact Brennan Armstrong and where he lands from the transfer portal. Maybe one of those 2 locations could be a great landing spot for Armstrong. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. And then, of course, we're in the exam break for UVA basketball, both the men and the women, who are both undefeated, taking exams this week. A lot of schools don't take the exam break. There's games on today, all day today, and a good bit of tomorrow as well, college basketball. But UVA is on break So we'll kind of assess where things are at this stage of the season for both the men and the women coming up this week, and then getting you ready for the game with right now number one Houston. Houston has a tough one today with Alabama, but if Houston wins that one, likely a 1-2 matchup in JPJ next Saturday, and really excited about that opportunity. So for more UVA sports news in general, go to AugustaFreePress.com. And if you have anything for me, questions, comments, stories you want me to look into, you want to throw a criticism out there, I don't care about that. I welcome that as well. Please send me an email at chris@AugustaFreePress.com.